Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in again for episode 38 of AEZ All Elite Zone here on YouTube every Tuesday night. So thanks for joining us. And again, so we got a few more, Adam, this week. It's been we've been holding down the fort for a lot of these weeks, but it's nice to have some company. And Paul, we haven't had you on the show directly yet. We did play, like I said, we
In a
played one of your.
while, yes, unfortunately, but lucky enough today I had some time, so let's
Well,
talk
we
wrestling.
Well, we appreciate you, making some time to join us today. And of course, we've got Connor, the man who started it all, and he's back to join us for another week. And how are things going with you, Connor?
It's going all right. Yeah, it's going pretty good.
All right, Adam, sir, a pleasure once again.
Oh yeah,
Bearded
always
Wonder.
always great, always fun being here on Tuesdays with you all. So, and this is my first time meeting Paul as well. So nice to meet you, Paul.
Great, awesome guys. And there's always, like we always say, there's always so much to talk about in the world of professional wrestling, especially these days. I think again we're peaking out right now, and there's just almost like there's not enough hours in the day to keep up with wrestling actually these days. But it's amazing. There's so much choice, and there's a lot of opinions out there. That's for sure. So I thought, today, guys, we could start off, and I was just kind of looking up on some of the AEW groups on Facebook, and this one guy kind of posted a list of things that he thought were very positive for AEW in 2024. And one of the things that he did mention, and I thought I would bring it up and get to your opinion on it. And, we've seen some exciting wrestling because of this initiative that Tony Khan has really partnered himself with other promotions. Pretty much like I don't think we've ever quite seen these kind of partnerships to this extent. There's always especially in any NWA years, there's a lot of that kind of like back and forth between the promotions because we're kind of joined. So we're kind of seeing that. So we're this person who made the list was really pushing, saying, hey, like new partnerships with CMLL and Stardom and New Japan and any other promotions that we've actually seen some of the guys being brought up. And some people really see this as a positive. We've seen some stars that we would have never have seen, or some of us would have never been exposed to. Like myself, I was never really following New Japan. So for me to see some of these guys come over and have some amazing matches really opened my eyes to other types of wrestling and other types of superstars that are out there. But I wanted to get your opinion. Are these partnerships, are they starting to take away from the actual AEW roster and the AEW storylines, just to kind of throw in a guy that no one really knows, or a small portion of the audience knows, just to kind of showcase some of these some just wrestling, right? So maybe Paul, I'll as the new guy, I'll maybe
I think I might actually be coming from the opposite opinion or the opposite direction than you guys are. I watch a lot of New Japan, so when I see AEW guys go over, I appreciate where they're used, when they're used. Was it Gates of Agony were used in the tag league? John Moxley's the new champion. Jack Perry was in Bullet Club for about a month, I believe, and he had a big feud with Shota Umino, and it's like that part I think is good. Let's take Jack Perry, who we need to make a heel. Let's have him disappear for a while. He can practice being a heel somewhere else. And then when he comes back, he's got a fresh new character. He's got a fresh new identity. I think that works. I think it could get better now that Rocky Romero is, I forget what his title is, but I know he's got a title in both companies, like talent relation, something like that. So I think it might be smoother now that there's one person in charge. But that's the way I kind of view it. I like that AEW can even send Bryan Danielson to Mexico, do a bunch of shows, have him come back. That part I like. I think if I state my opinion, you guys might have something similar. So I'll leave that and see what you guys think.
Sure. Connor, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. Adam knows I've preached this a lot. They sign too many people. They bring in too many people. It's just ridiculous how many people that they bring in and you got all these people who don't have anything to do. or there could be stars like Ethan Page could be a really top star, but we got guys like people don't even know or aren't gonna know. Um, if people aren't gonna watch New Japan through AEW, they're never gonna watch New Japan. There is some bright sides to it. Uh, Maybe you can gain some audiences from Japan or Mexico. And I feel like AEW one day will run at the Tokyo Dome in the future for Forbidden Door or something. Maybe attraction wise, I don't really see it going too far, but there's not many. And like one of the things that AEW sends a lot of people like Bryan Danielson. The only thing I like about that is if they send someone and they get injured, well, there goes your whole storyline. That's what WWE did. Triple H got injured, then ever since then they stopped doing that. Personally, for me, I liked when AEW just strictly focused on AEW because that's how you create new stars. That's how you get your audience to know. Ethan Page is the best example. Very good heel, very good talker, very good wrestler. All he needs is the time. And with new signings and more these people coming in from different companies, it's hard to do that. But yeah, it is good seeing guys, especially for Forbidden Door season. That's always a good way to do it because you got to have some New Japan guys in for Forbidden Door season because it's pay-per-view and you want people to know who these guys are. There is some positives and negatives, but yeah, that's my opinion on that.
Right. Adam, I'll toss it over to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, to take from both Connor and Paul there, the idea of having that working relationship with another promotion, I mean, it's solid. It's reminiscent of the territory days back in the old days of wrestlers going to different companies and wrestling in different areas for different promoters. So it's kind of nice to kind of bring that back, but they have to do it in the right way. Like Connor said, you can't, overstack a roster that's already full with guys coming over from another promotion. You can feature them sometimes, for the most part, but don't overexpose them. Myself, I started liking New Japan maybe a few years ago. And so, I'm liking to see these guys coming over to American television, because you never get to see that. And so, you get guys like, an Okada or Ibishi or, or Swerve just mentioned Shingo. He's a big fan of Shingo. He'd like to wrestle him. I think that'd be a great match. And so you got to do it the right way. And so it's the right when you do like special attraction events like Forbidden Door is the right way to introduce some of these New Japan guys over to American audiences. Because you got the AEW fans that are going to get the pay-per-view anyways because they still want to see their favorite AEW wrestler. But then you introduce these New Japan guys and they show their skills in the ring and then they're like, well, now I'm interested in this product. But it's nice to have that working relationship, but don't overbear the roster that you already have that's full of talent that can be utilized in the correct way.
Yeah, no, all great points, guys. And I'm still kind of forming my own opinion on this to see, because there has to be, it all comes down to money. There's a reason why they're doing it. And I know even Tony Khan can be the biggest fanboy in the world and just want to make dreams come true and dream matches, because it seems like there's a handful of the top wrestlers that are benefiting from these relationships. But there has to be money driven. There has to be marketing dollars. There has to be something. What is it? I mean, is it worth it? I mean, and I don't know if you guys can see like where it is, because you're not going to do these type of moves and spend this kind of money and bring guys over and do and introduce new characters and from another promotion that's being built without a reason, right? Or it's got to do with money. So is this, with the ratings kind of going up and down, they're doing their best on some of these great international signings that they've had. So do we find that this is where he thinks that this is where it's going to save the company? And I don't know, maybe thoughts in terms of from a marketing standpoint and kind of like why would you do this, right? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, or that's
I have a weird analogy that I could use for this. If you go to a restaurant and you open it up and it only has like one type of flavor of food, we only sell salty foods. You're going to go, okay, I'm going to go there sometimes, but not all the time. But if you go to a restaurant, it's got all the flavors. You're going to go, okay, this is what I want. I want a little bit of everything. I think Tony Khan wants to kind of present this idea of this worldwide culture of wrestling. Look, we have Mexican wrestling, we have strong style, we have junior heavyweights, we have the big boys. I feel like he wants to present this as like an all-in-one. Some people can argue that WWE has their wrestlers are WWE wrestlers and they're very kind of specific in a genre. I feel like Tony Khan wants to almost be like Eric Bischoff and go like, haha, but we have everything. We have luchas, we have strong style, we have blah, blah, blah. And I think maybe he sees money in that. If it's more of a variety show, you might tune in for the flippy boys. But if there's too much flippy boys, I'm not going to tune in because I like my meaty men. You know what I mean? You got to have a little bit of everything.
Yeah, actually, yeah, great point, Paul. And maybe to your point, and maybe this is also part of, because again, to your point of like, is he seeing this and want that international cuisine of everything, a bit of everything? Is this to set up pay-per-views in all these different territories? We're going to see a pay-per-view like you guys kind of brought up. Are we like that, in Japan? Are we going to see a pay-per-view from Mexico? Or you've created some of these fan bases and some of the characters back and forth to almost help to promote those big shows where they're going to make money at. I mean, that's the only thing I can see that. And to your, to add your point of being the Eric Bischoff, hey, we've got some of this. Look at us. We're here for wrestling and we know wrestling, all types of wrestling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but Connor, I don't know if you have some additional thought.
AEW's brought a lot of guys in, not even from New Japan, but like CMLL, New Japan, Stardom.
Even indies.
Yeah, a lot of these guys haven't drawn a dime. I mean, just to say it outright, they haven't. I mean, certain guys have. What was the guy? They went to Houston, Texas. He was the original Sin Cara.
Mystico.
Yeah, they went there and they had a Rampage match. It was him against someone, and then they sold a lot of tickets for that once they announced that match. So in some territories like Texas, you can easily put in a luchador like that. Then a lot of people will know him. As Adam said, you got to do it in a. You can't just do it just for doing it. You got to have a reason to do it. Like, I like to see a New Japan versus AEW War Game, Blood and Guts match. Like, that would be a perfect story. Yeah, there's a lot of benefits and not so good benefits to it. But Forbidden Door season, you should always want to get some of these guys on TV and get some of these guys known, because if no one knows who they are, no one's gonna. I mean, of course, you got the hardcore fans are always going to buy. But yeah, there's I think some of this is Tony's fantasy dream matches, which I think which I always say this, like, if you want to be a promoter of wrestling, you got to like wrestling somewhat. You can't just be in it just for money. Like, if I was a promoter, I would want to do like you want to make money and keep things going, but you also got to be a fan of wrestling to know what you're doing. So yeah, that's what
and it's entertainment, right? The bottom line, it's entertainment, right? So if he's trying to put on the most entertaining product out there, then maybe that's what he's trying to do. I just wonder if the more he's introducing a lot of these international talents, does it take away from the Forbidden Door pay-per-view?
Not necessarily, not necessarily, especially if he's doing it with the New Japan, because that working relationship between AEW and New Japan is very strong. It's very rare where you see two large global promotions working together and making it work. I mean, you've already incorporated a lot of your New Japan wrestlers into your AEW programming, and you've already signed a lot of former New Japan wrestlers to your program.
The Elite are technically New Japan wrestlers.
And technically they're New Japan wrestlers, yes. And they still have a little group over there, And so I think it's more, and to go back to everything about the markability of all of this, it's the idea of selling out arenas globally. WWE is doing it. AEW did it last year with England, so it's like both these companies want to sell out globally. And the way AEW is doing it now is they're matching up with these promotions. They can sell out arenas in these areas. They can sell out an arena in Tokyo, Japan. They can sell out an arena in Mexico City. They can do all of this if they wanted to. They don't have to just stay stateside. you know, and I know we're comparing apples to oranges with WWE and AEW, but as I've talked about many times on Talking Elite, those are your two big organizations in pro wrestling right now. I mean, that's stateside. You know, it's the biggest ones. They're starting to get recognized, especially AEW. But markability, this is the idea of taking your product and going global with it. But again, going back to what I said earlier, you have to do it in the right framework and not just as a pure-hearted fan. You got to be a promoter and a businessman about it.
I think the only thing that can hurt, and you see some of this in WWE as well, is you really need to find a way to come across, because there's a language barrier, right? So, and I know promos are a massive thing of the developing the storyline and the personalities. And I've seen they've actually did with the Shinsuke, for example, that they just let him talk in his ominous way he talks in Japanese and has a subtitle, because that gets the character gets across, right? I mean, kind of, which I get it works. And is it Chapada who's doing the whole phone thing? Is that who it is? Where he's like, they're getting him, and he's just like, it's like translating, and he's just kind of like pressing buttons, right? So they're trying to do. Right, so they're coming up with this gimmick right now that it's been pretty funny, but how is it in terms of, do you think the language barrier hurts the character development in North America?
Starting with me, I'm in a weird position where I grew up in a multicultural group. So to me, I'm going to go, well, no, it's not going to hurt, because look how many Spanish-speaking people are in the States. So if they have Spanish people speaking people on TV, you might have people go, hey, he talks like I talk. I love this guy. Because you can see how, WWE had a couple Mexican stars, but they kind of fumble them. So it's like, is AEW trying to find their own Rey Mysterio? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I think might be part of it. I think there is enough non-English speaking people in North America to support that, but I might just be really optimistic about this topic. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, but going to your point, Rapal, about AEW finding that Latin star. I mean, perfect example is someone that kind of is the manager interpreter, Alex interpreting Penta and Ray. That's a perfect example. Is you get Penta speaking the Spanish, but then Alex kind of converts it to English so the English speakers know what he was saying. So you kind of got to balance that out too. But I don't think there is that language barrier, because again, like Paul said, you're trying to grab that audience. You're trying to grab a certain audience. They're like, oh, I see this guy on TV. He speaks my language. I want to watch him more. So I don't think there's an issue with the language barrier. It's just how, as a promoter, you got to show it and produce it on air.
Because you could almost argue there's been a lot of Texan, Mexican stars, like even Conan. Like, he's American, but he's very Southern in the States. So you can even use stars like that to be like, look, hey, this guy, he speaks the same slang as I do. So I think there is a bit of like, I can identify there.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, and I get it too, and maybe we're not exposed to as much, and maybe especially in the 80s when there was a lot more of those local regional shows where they almost like produce, like we had it here in Toronto. We had, when Jack Tunney was producing, we had Maple Leaf Wrestling. That was a lot of matches right out of Maple Leaf Gardens, so, and it had the promotion. So I can see where a lot of the international stars will come in, especially because they can do promos in that language, right? So, and maybe we don't see that as much. We don't see those broadcasts because we're watching the English broadcast. But if it's a broadcast in, say, Mexico, for example, are they utilizing more their Spanish-speaking stars because for the promos, right? And to get that character. So I can see that there is benefit there if they're trying to start broadcasting internationally. So they have those guys that can do it. Like I remember when Claudio was with WWE, and when they would do a lot of those European tours, I mean, I think Claudio knows like 8 languages. So, so he's kind of guy who's going to come into play when they're doing those tours all over Europe, right? Because he can do all those stops at the radio stations and he can speak all those languages, right? So I get that you do need these guys for when you do those shows, especially like, you know, if the plan is to keep on growing and become a global product, then you need to have the representation and the communication for that. So I get that. If that's the long game, you know, that are we seeing is Tony, you know, that kind of like, is that the vision, right? Are we seeing that's where it's going to go?
And then I think one thing we have to remember is some of the hires are, this guy's not going to be a star now. He's going to be a star in 7 years. Like someone like Takeshita, that's a rookie. Like if you're a baseball or football analogy, like you grab that hot rookie that, you know, give him 3 years and he's going to be an absolute megastar. Sometimes you have to get those guys on your team now because you're like, oh, someone else gets him. If someone else gets Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan, and that's the way you view this wrestler, you have to grab him right away, get him in your training regimen, and get him ready for TV. Like they're pushing Takeshita like he's second coming, right? And if that's how they want to do it, then I'm all for that.
Right. Adam?
Yeah, I was gonna agree. I mean, just the pushing of international talent, but again, you have to balance that out with pushing your own, you know, homegrown talent, and you got to make it happen, and you got to make it work. The storyline has to work, or the story frame has to work with it. So I have no problem seeing more international talents kind of appearing on AEW, but I think as far as signing with the company, I don't think you need to sign them. But yeah, no, I love the idea of AEW bringing in these international wrestlers and kind of integrating them into the programming.
Yeah, and I'll say too, kind of I'm going to conclude on this subject. You know, I have totally appreciated some of these talents, like I said earlier, like guys I've never seen that I would never know to go and look at or find. Like I have become a huge fan of Zack Sabre Jr. I think he's actually become one of my favorites, and having that really exposure to him when he fought Bryan Danielson, and then I was able to see him live when TNA was in Toronto, and being, you know, really close to the ring and being able to hear him and the way he interacts, and he's just like, I was blown away. I thought he was amazing. So yeah, so there's definitely benefits to the fan of just wrestling fans getting exposed to some of these guys and seeing some great matches, and it's their storytelling they're able to do. So, you know, if there is the language barrier, they're using everything else to tell the story, right? And that really does come across. But I just wanted to get to kind of switch gears here on a topic, I guess, as we've kind of brought up kind of the man behind all of this, and just wanted to get your thoughts if, you know, with Tony getting involved, you know, with the storyline with the Elite and getting physical and going through all that, and, you know, the neck brace, and do we like this? Is this needed? I don't know. I just want to get you guys and see, is this helping by doing it? Does it feel kind of WWE, you know, 90s, you know, when Vince McMahon just couldn't help himself by being involved in everything? Is there an ego getting involved here? I don't know. Just want to get your thoughts, and I guess we'll start with you again, Paul.
Okay, so I'm going to say that's not my type of wrestling. Like, I'm not a big fan of the authority figure. You know, like, that's just not my style. I'm not a big fan of it. But saying that, I have to have some sort of self-awareness and say the most recognizable storyline ever in wrestling. If you ask a normal person, non-wrestling fan, hey, name one wrestling storyline. Hey, wasn't there that time that guy beat up his boss? That story is the number one most recognizable story in all of wrestling. So, as much as I'm not a fan of it, I do have to recognize that, hey, it works. It might not necessarily be working here, but the concept and gimmick has worked several times over. So, I guess we're going to do it then.
Yeah, I know. I get it. Right? That Stone Cold and Vince was massive. Right. So, no, it's interesting, you know, and again, we saw him with the neck brace on in the NFL draft.
And Eric Bischoff. There's a few examples there, you know?
Right. So it's funny. But Connor, how do you feel about this angle?
I really feel like Tony knew that he had to do something different. he had to pull something out that he's never done before, with a lot of things business-wise down. I don't know. I hope this doesn't end the way I think it's going to end, because if it does, what he just said a few days ago is going to make no sense. He says he's nothing like Eric Bischoff, right? Well, if this ends up being, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall puts Eric Bischoff through the damn stage, and then a few weeks later, Tony Khan is the leader of the elite, the new elite. What the hell did you just say a few days ago, dude? Like, you can't say this and then do exactly what Eric Bischoff did.
It didn't work, brother.
I don't want to see that. What I would like to see is, Kenny Omega is going to be on Dynamite tomorrow night. Right. So what I think what they should do is, Tony Khan said today that he's going story-wise, obviously. He's obviously going to be there. Story-wise, he will be working with AEW remotely. So if things go out of hand, they mentioned this on Collision. If things go out of hand, who's going to be in charge? EVPs. Well, there's more than 2 EVPs. You got Kenny Omega. So I feel like this might be a way to bring Kenny Omega back regularly, often maybe, in this authority role. But my hope would be Tony Khan putting together a few guys to go against the new elite in Blood and Guts, which is coming up pretty soon. We're in April. I'll be in May. Doesn't it normally happen in May, June?
Blood and Guts?
Yeah, normally it happens in May or June, close to Forbidden Door season. Maybe that's the route they go.
The next one is Double or Nothing, right? That's the next pay-per-view that's coming up?
Yeah. I know they do it normally around this time, like Forbidden Door-ish, Double or Nothing, because last year was the Elite and Blackpool Combat Club, if I'm not mistaken. But that's the way I would like to see it play. I don't want to see Tony Khan be like what he did on last Wednesday was perfect for a story, but I just don't want to see him on TV every week like Eric Bischoff was, and he just calls out Triple H every week.
See, the problem is when Eric Bischoff was an authority figure with the NWO, it was the hottest WCW ever was.
Well,
so as much as I go, I hate this story. I'm like, it doesn't make
just a few years later of what happened to it.
Oh, so, no, fair enough. I know. Yeah.
If we get the whole roster as the Elite.
You know what, Connor, I think, because you said you don't want to see him on TV every week, but I think they were kind of alluding to it in one of the stories. I think it was on Collision I was watching, and they're like, oh, doesn't look like Tony's going to be able to travel. So who's going to be in charge when they're in Canada? So I think it's almost an angle to show like that those guys, the Elite, are going to do whatever because they're in charge. So by removing Tony, say he's not even there, that helps the storyline, because everyone's like, well, why are they still doing everything? If Tony's sitting in the back, why does he do something? But he's not there. So, so they're not babysitting. So I think that's
what Kenny Omega is going to do, because they, as you mentioned, Nigel and Tony mentioned that, and there's more than 2 EVPs. So Kenny Omega is an EVP. So Kenny Omega is going to be there tomorrow night. So I'm curious to see how that unfolds. But this could be a way to bring Kenny Omega back regularly. Maybe not wrestling wise, but as an EVP doing this, obviously Tony Khan's still going to be there probably, like not story wise, but I feel like that would be a great way to still keep Kenny involved, because he's going to be out this entire year probably. I'm curious to see where they go. As long as you don't do an Eric Bischoff, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Adam, did you send your thoughts and prayers to Tony after?
Yeah, I was watching the draft and I was waiting for Jacksonville to pick. I was like, I just want to see Tony in the neck brace, and he was there with his dad next to him. So yeah, it was a shocking thing to me, like, because again, we haven't seen anything like that since Bischoff, NWO, and Austin and McMahon. I mean, obviously you had the PG era WWE of the Authority against, pretty much everybody, especially Bryan Danielson.
Oh yeah, Triple H and Stephanie.
Stephanie, but for that was more PG. That wasn't what we grew up with. That wasn't the WCW Authority, NWO, and the Steve Austin. But
to be fair, it's still that same.
It's still that same archetype of the guy beat up his boss. They're fighting their bosses. For me, this was like, I'll have to kind of pick from both Paul and from Connor. this was something that we kind of saw before, but also it's something new that Tony has dreamt up at. Again, he's got to do something drastic to separate his product from other companies. And so as long as you can follow that story and the idea of Kenny coming back, I like the idea of this whole blood and guts thing of the new elite, those 4 guys against hand-picked opponents of Tony Khan and maybe even Kenny Omega, like coming together as like a power team to be like, we picked these 4 guys to wrestle you 4 in a blood and guts match. I like a little stipulation added. I'd like to see if the new elite loses, Matthew and Nicholas are stripped of their EVP powers, and they're no longer EVPs, which leaves only Kenny and Tony in charge of AEW. And so I think that would be an interesting thing to kind of up the ante in a blood and guts match. And so again, though, it has to go with storyline. You have to make the storyline make sense. If it doesn't make sense, you lose your audience. You lose your interest, and you're going to have people online complaining, this is dumb. This is the stupidest story I've seen ever. This is why this company is trash. This is why this company is not going to be around anymore, yada, yada, yada. It's like, they're still here. They're worth billions of dollars right now. Tony Khan apparently is worth $2.3 billion.
And to use a recent example, when, not to dive too much into this, but when the CM Punk Jack Perry video came out, everyone went, what are you doing? This is weird. Why are you doing this? And then did you hear the reaction Jack Perry got? What was it? His last New Japan match. It was in the States.
It was in Chicago.
Went nuts. And now he's come back and they're pushing him to the moon. And it's like, no, that works. That's fantastic. Okay.
Yeah,
so hopefully this moment is going to be one of those where we're confused now, but give it a month, we go, oh, it all makes sense. Okay.
I mean, you look at it as it's long-term storytelling. AEW did it with the Punk MJF story. WWE did it with basically the whole Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns story in the Bloodline. It's long-term storytelling. And so that's something you have to stick with, and you have to keep the audience interested in. And so integrating Tony Khan into this, in my opinion, was smart. Because it gives him time to kind of like, not be on screen too much. He can be behind the scenes and have someone else, run stuff while he's doing the actual stuff backstage. But again, this is my tiff with Tony Khan. And we mentioned it on the Talking Lead episode of the assessment of Tony Khan. The man has to know where to cross the line on comments. By being on the NFL Network and calling WWE the Harvey Weinstein of professional wrestling, Tony, you got to watch it, buddy. I know you're trying to rattle the cage a little bit, but dude, like, there's also
I will say,
go ahead.
He angered the wrong group of people by those comments. Mm-hmm. And that I understand. Once I heard it said that way, I went, oh, that makes sense. You're not putting, like the wrong people got made fun of, and that's not fun.
Right. And that's the thing is Tony Khan is also getting a lot of those naysayers towards him. This does not help it any further. If he wants to be successful, and we've mentioned it before, he's got to calm back on some of the comments about shooting shots at WWE all the time. And he's got to calm down on Twitter a little bit. He can be a great businessman, and he can be a great, good competition in WWE and not even mention them by name. He can just say this other company. He doesn't always have to put WWE in any of the promos, anything like that. He can go that route of saying this other company. So that's just my whole grip with Tony Khan about it.
Yeah, no, all great points. I'd like to see where this is going, but I do think because of the angle they're doing it, that you've got the EVPs and they're running things that eventually people are like, well, okay, this is kind of dumb. Like Tony's like there, he's the boss. Why is he letting this happen? So introducing this where they actually go in and actually, assault the boss does kind of, make it their presence in this story. So I get why they did it. Yes, but yeah, I totally agree with you guys. He has to remain. Yes, not everything needs to be a work. Not everything he needs to bring up. He needs to still make sure and he's acting with integrity, especially when you're on like the NFL Network. His family still owns, teams in other leagues, right? So he does represent not just AEW. So I'm sure to your point, Adam, that someone's like, okay, here, you're talking, this is the whole Jacksonville Jaguars organization here as well. So, just kind of like, tone it down a bit. Not everything is at work. Not everything is about wrestling, right?
That is a good point too, because you have one side of the group that's like, well, he's keeping kayfabe alive, brother. He's pushing what he wants. But the other side of the coin is sort of like, well, modern day Triple H is not going to show up in a neck brace. He's very professional, suit and tie, the way he talks, everything's well put together. You look at that guy and you go, he runs $1 million company. But Tony Khan showing up with a neck brace and turning his head like this while wearing the neck brace, you're like,
yeah,
I get what you're doing. Little bit silly, and not everyone wants to ride the silly train. Some people do, and that's fine. Not everyone does. So it's like, are you helping? Are you hurting? Is it because when people chuckle, like when real sportscasters go, haha, Tony Khan, that hurts, because real sports fans are going to go, oh, you guys think wrestling's silly too, so that enforces my viewpoint. But if you come on and you're very professional and someone goes, oh, look at these guys, you're going to, oh, maybe I should take a look at wrestling,
Yeah, dude, to your point, and that's when you get those people go, oh, see, wrestling is fake. See, look, right? So again, which every wrestling fan can't stand when someone says fake. Like,
speaking of,
and but that just amplifies that opinion, right? Like, oh, it's a farce, right? So which is disappointing, but. I guess to kind of carry on, we're talking about the Jacksonville and the home of AEW. And I don't know if you guys, picked up, and I don't know. I guess it means a lot to me for some reason. I'm a big crowd guy, and I know, like, I love the crowd. I love the crowd shots. I love the vibe of the crowd. I love the vocalness of the crowds. For being, and I don't know if you guys had kind of noticed it, and I was watching Collision the other night. And for being the home of AEW and not a massive little stadium there, it sounded very quiet at Daly's place. Like, considering that's a home, I don't know what you guys thought, but they avoided even showing the kind of the crowd that they would normally show. Like, so was there not like that little crowd this past week? Are you guys noticing that, or did you guys notice that?
I think this kind of touches on one topic that AEW sort of has a problem with in general, is too many shows together, and it kind of kills the crowd. So if we're in Toronto and AEW comes to Toronto once, you're gonna go, oh my god, I have to see the show. But there's like 5 different shows in a weekend in Toronto. So if they're doing the same thing everywhere else, maybe a lot of fans are going, oh, maybe we'll go to the Saturday show. Maybe we'll go to this, instead of going, no, we have to go Friday night because that's, you know what I mean? Like, are they scattering their shows instead of trying to focus everyone to a few events?
No,
I'm on there too. That's the issue of recording, of taping a Rampage after a Dynamite. You have that opportunity of doing 3 live shows a week right now, including a week of a pay-per-view. I understand when you internationally travel, sure, you may want to record or pre-record a show for the traveling. But when you have shows and a pay-per-view stateside, there's no reason why you can't have a live Dynamite, a live Rampage, and a live Collision. I mean, you look at someone like a Britt Baker, who owns a dentistry office in Orlando on a Tuesday, and she flies out that night just to get to the show on Wednesday. She's flying out and leaving a business to do a live show. So there's no reason why you shouldn't have a live show in a different city every other day. Because listen, this is the problem with AEW. I understand they're trying to keep it minimal of both, injuries to their wrestlers and not doing too much in a couple of days, and also trying to maybe save money to make all these contracts happen. But you got to explore a little bit. I mean, that's why it's a big deal with this deal that, you know, Tony Khan has to make with WBD. This would be a big deal. They will get tons of revenue with this deal that they can start being like, okay, now we can start doing more live stuff. You know, look at something like the house shows that AEW are doing. You know, Connor's been to a few of them. You know, it's like, that's perfect. You're doing live events. But on TV, that's where it matters most, because those people are going to want to buy tickets if you're only in their city for one night. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a big difference with WWE, though. You know, when WWE did their show in Puerto Rico, they had, you know, Friday Night SmackDown in Puerto Rico live, but then they had the show the next night live. That works. You know, if you're going to do Canada, do one show in Toronto and then maybe Friday night in a different city, and then Saturday do Collision in the city after that. And if it's the weekend of a pay-per-view and you're doing a pay-per-view in Canada, holy hell, go back to Toronto. Then people will be like, cool, I get to see a live show and a pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I think that's part of that's missing is those live shows, and it's oversaturating. It's, you know, when they're in Toronto where I am, and because when they were doing some of the shows, it was like Toronto, 2 Toronto shows, and then Hamilton, which is only an hour away. So then you're like, okay, well, I could, you know, I mean, there's just almost too much choice, and so a lot of the tickets are still really expensive. So I think you're offering too many shows, and ticket prices are too expensive. So, which again, that kind of translates to the crowds not being, because you're like, well, I'm going to go to only one because I'm paying $300 for this ticket when that ticket should be $67 or $80, right? And you'll be able to go. So, especially when they first were coming to Canada, it was ridiculous. The pricing was insane, and people were just going nuts for it. But then it kind of calmed down and it almost like fizzled out. It was not making it affordable to go or support multiple shows, and not having. And I think with WWE, their model, you know, where guys get paid on the road and you get paid for every match, and the guys, there was something to be in a feud in a program, right? Like if you went on tour and you, like with Kamala, yeah, he's going on tour, he's fighting Hulk Hogan all across North America. There's gonna be steel cage matches, you know, or Honky Tonk Man, you know, battling with Randy Savage, right? You have the guys, so they do these matches constantly. So when they actually get on TV, they've been already working together. So the next match is like, they're amazing because they've had months and months to perfect this rivalry that they have, right? So I think that kind of gets lost because when every televised show, you're like, oh, these guys again. Well, if they were just on tour, you'd be in front of a new audience every single time you're there, right? So now we're seeing like, oh, it's Paige against Swerve again. Right. And they have to come up with something fabulous and fantastic every single time because it's the third view, like it's the third match on TV, whether like, you know, the weekly show or a pay-per-view. Right. So I think that's missing. You know, when you get that and you get guys going on tour and they get into a groove and they really learn to work with each other. So everything is just crisp. Right. So I think, again, that's missing there. But
I will say this, though. Monday's Raw, I watched a little bit of it. I couldn't get into it. The draft was pointless, and also that KC crowd completely dead. Like they were quiet. There was no pops for a lot of things. They weren't they were quiet. So to say that AEW crowds are crap right now and comparing them to WWE crowds can sell out arena. But if that crowd's not involved and not loud, what kind of show are you watching?
Yeah, no, but to your point, so there has been some great AEW crowds this year for sure, and amazing. And when AEW crowds are on point, I think they're the best crowds. Like they're just into it. They're not just cheering for the sake of cheering, like kids cheering for their superheroes. They're into it and they're helping the storyline and they're invested, which is awesome. And I really appreciate that. Yeah, to your point, doesn't mean a big crowd doesn't always translate into, you know, a vibe, right? Like I think some of these wrestlers will say, oh, I'd rather be in a smaller, tight arena. But if the thing is, the roof's been blown off, the energy is 10 times better because it feels like everyone's on top of you and they feed off it, right? Especially if it's an open air stadium. So I was thinking too, and I took that into consideration. I'm just looking at Daly's place. I know it's open. You know, is it because it's open and we're not hearing anything? Is that attracting from it? But, you know, it almost had and Kevin Nash actually said on his show that he referred to the AEW crowds as going back to almost pandemic levels. I mean, it's not quite that bad, but Daly's place did kind of have that like, hey, like, you know what I mean? So,
and then there's the line of where it's like, okay, do we go to arenas and say we're a big company because we go to arenas, even though the arena is not really selling? Or do you go to smaller venues and say, look at that, we sold out the Hammerstein Ballroom, we sold out Kokurin Hall? Like, Kokurin Hall, for those people don't know, it's a very small arena in Japan. It sits like 700, something like that. It has a wrestling show in it every single night. Like, it is, everyone loves that arena, but it's one of those, it's so small, you can hear every single fan yelling and it sounds so passionate. Would you rather a small, passionate, intimate crowd that sounds amazing? Or would you say, we sold 20,000 tickets with a crowd that doesn't sound as good? It's kind of like, I hear it in bands. With, like, if you're going to record something, do you record it live in front of a small audience so you get a great response? Or do you say, oh, we recorded it in a big studio, blah, 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 in front of whatever? So I think for Tony, he wants to do the stadium, but part of me is like, maybe get smaller venues and pack them in tight.
Hasn't Coker hosted a couple of the G1s?
Coker, yeah, they host a lot of like actually fairly
G1
shows.
Yeah,
but like they're there.
That name sounded familiar.
Yeah, like they're there for Best of Super Juniors, all the like they're there consistently. So as a fan, you go, it's like Daly's Place. When you start watching enough, you go, we're home. I know all this arena. I know if you look that way, there's these hallways. I know, that's where the Elite used to sit when they blah, blah, blah. Like, I like that. You get an intimate feel of an arena, and it gives a different, like, world building, I guess. Going back to Daly's Place in the pandemic, it felt like a video game. Okay, if I went to Daly's Place, I know I could go over this hallway and there's Dark Order, and I could go down this hallway and there's you just feel more of a world. But those big arenas like WWE doesn't really have it because it's like generic backstage. It's not necessarily like a world that you have. It's not the same feeling. I know I'm saying that poorly, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
I was talking to someone about this earlier. I think it was Hargrave, actually. AEW needs to go back to the format they used in 2019, 2020, before the pandemic happened. They were in 6,000 seat arenas for weekly shows. And pay-per-views, they went bigger. Like, it was like Baltimore for Full Gear. They sold like can't remember the exact number, but it was a good amount of seats. They need like TV should be at least 6,000 capacity. Because that's what they're drawing like for Daly's Place. This is going to be hard to believe, but Collision sold more than Dynamite actually, which is hard to believe because it felt like Dynamite. Well, I couldn't tell if Dynamite had a hot crowd or not because the audio was just messed up all night. But Collision, they were at some parts of the show that were louder than others. Swerved and Claudio, they were pretty hyped for. That was the best match in the show, I thought. Like, there were certain moments that were really quiet. People was, I don't know, but there's certain moments that it was louder than others. That was the finish show. Like on Raw last night, the CM Punk and Drew McIntyre stuff, that was the biggest crowd reaction. The other stuff, it was just crickets. But I think AEW needs to go back to 2019, the 2020, before the pandemic format. Because I remember they went to Texas one time, and they haven't went there since 2019 or 2020. And they sold the place out. You would think they sold the place out. It wasn't too big, it wasn't too small. Like you could see everybody. Like the lighting was perfect. I wish they had a streaming service so I could tell you guys the episode and everything. But they had a lot of great arenas that they, it felt like 20,000 people was in there, but it was only 6,000, and they sold the place out. I'd rather them go to smaller places. I don't think they should go TNA small, but 6,000, 5,000, 6,000.
I could totally agree with that. It's big enough crowd. Like, I don't know if this might be a bad analogy, but like NHL, we have the Ontario Hockey League, the OHL. If you go to those arenas, they look the same as the normal arenas that sit 30, 40,000, whatever, but they sit 10. Like they're super small, they're super intimate. And I went to one show to the Ricoh Coliseum. I went to a WWE house show, and we literally had the worst seats in the house, all the way in the nosebleeds, all the way to the top. And that arena is so tiny. not tiny, I don't mean to use that word, but it was so kind of packed. Even the worst tickets, perfect view of the ring. You could see everything. It's not like ants, like if you're in the Sky Dome and you're watching football and everybody's this big. It's a perfect size. And I was like, these are literally the worst tickets, and these are fantastic. The hard cam was like right below us. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, I think to your guys' point, I 100% agree. And I think one of the appeals of AEW when it first came out, when you guys are talking about the small arenas, is the crowd felt into it. Right, and they're close to it. And I think you kind of brought up, you know what? I think that this is one of the things that's going to be, you know, a big thing for TNA. And Paul, I was going to kind of piggyback off a comment that you had made, you know, about sometimes the smaller shows, maybe small, but because they're so intimate that you can hear everything, and it's almost like there's more communication going on, where like there's more like the audience, the wrestlers are engaging with the audience more, and there's more, and they can hear comments. It was at that show that I was talking about when I saw Zack Sabre Jr. is in, you know, Mississauga, just outside of Toronto, and there's like 300 people. And it was one of the most fun I've had at a show and forever. And I wasn't even like a TNA Impact fan. One of my like my best friend came, and he was always been a traditional wrestling fan and been kind of out of it. He came to it and was like, man, if you want to ever, these guys come back again, I will totally go to the show. He didn't even have to know anybody, but just love, because it's so intimate. We were so up close to the action. We could hear him. And then Zack Sabre Jr. loves talking to the crowd, and he's hilarious. So again, that was like, and I came out going, we just spent like $20. And that was like the best $20 we've ever spent, and the most entertaining, because it was just wrestling, and this little crowd was cheering, this is wrestling in this little place. It was awesome. So I think TNA will, like, that kind of vibe they're creating, almost like if you get, I was when NXT, when, you know, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn,
the black and gold era.
Yes, that had a great appeal. And that crowd, that little crowd was great.
I see one of the first takeovers they ever had was lightning in a bottle. The crowd was nuclear, just ready for everything.
That was Full Sail University. Is where that small arena is where they did.
I know that was their home, but I remember
like
Kevin Owens cutting a promo.
NXT.
I remember they did like Brooklyn. It was like their first show,
was their first big takeover.
Yeah.
Their
so I remember
Kevin Owens cutting a promo about Full Sail. They would do Full Sail University as their like NXT TV.
And even that touches on what we were talking about. When you have Full Sail University, when you watch NXT, you go, yep, same place. I have that same small arena feeling where I'm comfortable with this arena now, and it feels like home.
Yeah.
So maybe that was like an unnoticed charm of that period at the time. So little crowds.
You know, and maybe that's where the smaller independent shows are going to thrive, because people are like, you know what, I'm tired of these big shows. The action's so far away. I want to be close up, and I'll go and support these. I'll spend $20 and just have a great time and be able to just interact and have great seats, right? And again, and just seeing and entertain for wrestling. You don't even need the storylines per se, but so it's interesting to see where go. And I think maybe they'll have to go back to those small arenas and get back to that vibe.
And to elaborate a little on that, I'm noticing in Ontario, now that I'm actually getting into more of the community, there's a lot of wrestling in Ontario. Like a lot. I can't stress how much wrestling is going on in Ontario right now. So let's say you, as the consumer, you go, okay, AEW's coming to town. We got to drive into the city. We got to get parking. We got to pay stadium food. We got to pay stadium parking, blah, blah, blah. Or for $20, we can go to the local place and get a $2 hot dog and a $1 drink, and we can buy a shirt for a guy that's $15, and we can support a local guy. So is that something that AEW needs to sort of be a bit more aware of? Because if you're coming to Toronto, which has a crazy hot scene, and you're charging $100, $200 a ticket, people might go, I can pay for 20 of my friends to go see one show for that same amount. So saying that, would smaller venues make the price tag a bit smaller? Would it make it easier to kind of swallow? Does having hot indie scenes hurt bigger companies depending on where they're touring?
I get your point. I guess it's kind of like you kind of mentioned. It's like having the Toronto Maple Leafs and then the Marlies, right? You have the big. So I think of Tony Khan, because I don't think Tony Khan's really interested in the family aspect or drawing or creating a family atmosphere, just like a WWE had to go that, and they went to PG because they're like, we need the families. We want to have dad who's grown up as a wrestling fan is now bringing his family, and he wants to be able to, come and enjoy without having to worry about, what's his kid's going to see or be exposed to. So until and that seemed to work very well for WWE, because again, they understood that they needed that fan base. You need to appeal to the younger audience and make it okay for the parents who have grown up and they were kids. So I think until you're going to start seeing now, when AEW is around long enough, you've got the fans who are like, hey, I want to start bringing my kids. Now, is Tony going to see that as like, we need to open up a market? We're missing out on merchandise. We have more kids. We can sell more kid merchandise, and kids go crazy for the merchandise, and they'll buy everything. So is it going to change a little bit once he starts appealing to families and making it affordable for families to come, right? Which I don't think it's not really meant to be families, and it's just the tickets are ridiculous, and it's too bad, right? So like you said, it's and so that's where I think maybe the indie shows will thrive, and they'll start getting these younger fans, because dad will take the kids, everyone's in for $80. And sure, I'll get you a drink and popcorn, right? And we have a great time, and they get to experience it live, and it's right, like they're right in front of them, right? And I think that resonates with kids when you have a product that's right in front of your face instead of up in the nosebleeds. And like you said, it's they're trying to relate to this little character they can't even see, and they have to watch a screen, right? So
if I'm paying a ticket to a live event and I watch that live event on a television screen, I'm not a happy person. I'm one of those people. I get grumpy. I'm here to see the band. I'm not here to watch the TV screen that the band's on. I could do that at home with the DVD.
I agree.
I think that's what OVW does so well with their shows in Louisville, because I'm literally 2 hours away from Louisville, where OVW is, and it's the nice thing. They're very kid friendly. They're good company, but they have really good wrestling, and so I think that's what they do best. And they do YouTube show. They do YouTube lives for their OVW weekly show, which is smart. They can't get a TV deal, so where else do you go? YouTube, So, but I'm like you, Paul. If I go to a concert, I don't want to look at a screen to see the band. I want to be as close as possible, and I want to see the action. That's how I felt a couple of years ago when I went to go see Trilogy of Terror show in Orlando with Black Veil Brides, Atreyu, Motionless in White, and Ice Nine Kills. I was literally maybe 20 feet from the stage, but they still had screens on the sides for people in the back to see. And those people are like, dude, we paid good money to get in here, and we're all the way back here. It's crazy. And I'm up there like close to a pit, and I'm like, this works for me. I'm getting my money's worth. So it's the same thing with a wrestling show. You want to get your money's worth at a wrestling show, whether it's a big company wrestling company or it's a small independent company. I like to support local independent wrestling. I went to a lot of them when I lived in Chicago. So I love just being in the small arena, watching those guys in the ring, just in person.
Yeah, no, I do feel it's really with the growth of the product, it's giving now that the access, kind of like what you said, Paul, how there's wrestling events all over Ontario. I mean, you can go from like Windsor to Hamilton, downtown Toronto, Mississauga.
One in Beaverton next month.
Right. So, it's giving that grass. It's kind of it's exposure to the grassroots, right? You're seeing what the guys are developed, but we didn't have that. I mean, as a WWF fan, a kid, that was the only product, and Vince made sure that was the only product in town, right? So you didn't really get the backstory on some of these guys, where you have now the access of social media and everything. You get to see it, and guys and people love it's. I kind of like, I think your point, guys, you brought up about seeing a band. I mean, wrestling and your favorite wrestlers and finding, it's like how people feel about music and finding that band. Like, oh my God, I saw this band, this bar. These guys were amazing, right? And then you talk about, I remember seeing them. There was like 50 people in this club, and now they're playing at stadiums, right? So people love to find that diamond in the rough and say, I was been following them. I said that, right? So people love that. So I think that gives it more than ever, just like how people love discovering new music and discovering new artists. It's the same type of feel, right? I think that exposure now more than ever than when we were kids.
I think we're almost like growing this sort of topic that's like coming together, because smaller venues, maybe seeing some smaller smaller stature wrestlers, because if the shows aren't as big, like there's a lot of topics here that maybe AEW can work with. Because so when I went to a WWE live show, it was years ago, but I knew fully well that there was going to be little kids there. I think New Day was the like main event, and it was like total kid friendly stuff. Everything was completely safe for kids. If I go to an AEW show with my kid, am I going to make my kid watch Jon Moxley bleed in front of my kid? That might happen, right? So it's like, if AEW did more smaller, family-oriented shows, drop the price tag, small, you know what I mean? Kind of build this way of presenting to families. Say, hey, look, it's going to be lots of characters, comic book character type people. You can get the flippy boys in there. You can have them promote to kids. There's not going to be any blading. There's not going to be any dangerous stuff. Bring the kids, come on down. We'll have a family deal, blah, blah, blah. That might help them draw in a crowd that they might not be fully promoting themselves to. Because I don't necessarily trust that if I put on AEW for a 6-year-old, is he going to see something that I might go, your parents aren't going to like that you saw that. Is he going to be introduced to a pizza cutter across the forehead? You know what I mean? Things can get a little crazy on some of these Dynamite.
Agreed.
But going to a WWE show, I know that that's not going to happen, and I can take my family and not go, oh my God, that's... So maybe this is something that AEW's got to look at, this more family-friendly, smaller show, smaller arena kind of demographic.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Connor, you want to chime in?
All I got to do, go back 2019, 2020 arenas, then you're set. That's it. Like, they're drawing the crowds. I would feel like if they would, like, they're drawing like 3,000-4,000 tickets for a Dynamite. To go to a small arena like they did in 2019, 2020, you're pretty much 80% full. And it sounds like 20,000 people. If you go back and watch 2019 and 2020 AEW, they're in Boston. The place holds like 8,000, but you're taking an awful lot of seats because behind the stage you're not counting those seats. So 6,000, you're pretty much sold out. It sounded like there was 20,000 fans in there because it was so loud compared to going to a 15,000 seat arena and only getting 2,000. That's all they got to do. And recently, AEW, now we're talking about this, AEW recently signed a new events coordinator, I believe that's what the title would be. They signed a new events coordinator, so I hope that they make some changes to that. And a lot of these kids, like, they play Fortnite, like video games. They've heard and seen everything that's going to be on AEW, basically. I have little kids on Fortnite cussing me out. They've heard everything Moxley's going to say.
Hey, but it's not the kids that are going to complain, right? It's the parents that you have to deal with.
Well, sometimes they learn it from the parents.
No, that's fair. It's fair.
Sometimes, but I think going back to that, and then once they get even hotter, they're selling arenas and they don't have enough room for people. That's when you take it up a notch and you go to a little bit bigger arenas.
No, I agree, and I know where we're approaching. We're over the hour mark here, and I just wanted to maybe bring up another topic here to kind of finish it off. And I know it's a small sample size so far, but it's been entertaining. Just want to get your opinion on how do we feel as Swerve as a champion so far. I'm starting to feel I'm getting a bit of a Seth Rollins type of vibe. There's similarities about being that fighting champion and wanting to be a certain type of face for the company. So far, Swerve's had 2 matches with Claudio and Kyle Fletcher, which I thought were both very entertaining matches. And he's coming out and kind of saying some of the announcements. And how do we feel so far about him being the face and his being that fighting champion? How do we feel about it so far?
I'm going to say I love it. I think he's someone that's gotten respect in the business for years because he was in Lucha Underground years ago, and he was fantastic. And so I just view it as like he's definitely walks the walk when it comes to the skill, and he's young, he's hip. Like I think Joe is a great champion for wrestlers, but when you look at Joe next to Swerve, Swerve just looks like $1,000,000. Like everything, just the way he kind of carries himself, you're like, you're a superstar. Marketing. You pass the what do they call it? The airport test. Like when you walk by in the airport, you go, "Whoa, the fuck? Who's this guy?" He just screams, "I'm something special." Where Joe, where he's a special wrestler, when you look at him, he doesn't give off that same vibe. You know what I mean? So I'm totally down for Swerve. I hope he has a long kind of reign and is something kind of to talk about, because there's been a few AEW champions that people kind of, as soon as they become champion, you kind of go, oh, yeah,
Page. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's like the build was great, but like I'm not that big of a fan of MJF, so I was kind of like, on him. So if Strickland brings something powerful to this that everyone can kind of rally behind, I think that'll be very important to the belt itself to bring some much needed prestige to it.
Agreed. No, good points, Paul. Connor, do you have any thoughts how you feel about Swerve so far, and how do you think he's developing?
Yeah, I think Dynamite was all right. I didn't think they gave him justice. They just gave him that little match, and that was it. Collision, the start of Collision should have been what the start of Dynamite was. He opened the show, he addressed the crowd, got a great reaction. Claudio comes out, talk a little bit, stuff match, they're the main event. A lot of people say Dynasty was the start of a new era. I actually think this last week's entire week was, and not Dynasty. I thought all three shows had improved on storytelling. Dynamite, they opened with Orange Cassidy and Trent. The ending was Tony Khan and all that. Two stories that you started with the story, you ended with the story. Collision, you got I like how they set up Swerve and Claudio. They didn't just announce it and that was it. And if you guys noticed on Dynamite and Collision, there's a lot of matches they didn't announce. Like Dynamite had a lot of stuff they didn't announce, and they announced it during the show. Same as Collision, Swerve and Claudio was announced during the show. Even Trent and Chuck Taylor's match, they had built that story all through Collision and a little bit at the end of Collision going into Rampage. I like how this entire week was really good storytelling. I think Swerve, I know it's early on, but I think one of the main matches that will stand out of his entire title reign is probably going to be that match with Claudio Castagnoli. That was a really, really good match and a very good first title defense. I'm curious to see who he goes against next, and we'll see that tomorrow night, as they're supposed to announce who his challenger is for Double or Nothing. I hope it's Christian Cage. MJF is the best heel in AEW history, but right now, currently, the best heel is Christian Cage. So your biggest baby face against your biggest heel, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, I thought AEW was they went to a right direction this last week. I thought there was some stuff that could have been left out. Even Deonna and Thunder Rosa, they're going to normally in AEW they have a match and they're done with it, but they had a match and they're going to continue the story. So I like how they're not giving up on stuff easily like they used to. And I feel like that's going to help them in the long run. Yeah, I think MJF Tribal Chief Wrestling Promotion. Yeah, MJF is going to be out for a little while. He's going to be out this entire year, I think. Let's go on with this comment right here. I'm the charging out of his wrestling. Yeah, he was trying to do physical therapy to avoid having surgery, but that didn't work. So he had to have surgery. He's going to be out even longer. Heel MJF is the best MJF, I feel. That's what people started liking about him. But anyways, I enjoyed it.
Even to add something to that, where it's like, I'm not a big fan of his, but if he only shows up for a little bit, does this thing, disappears, I think that's magic. That's what more wrestlers need to do. He shows up, talks a bunch of garbage, has 1 or 2 matches, makes a crap load of money, and goes on vacation.
Yeah, that's what he did originally.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant wrestling.
Which he did need to appear more because after a while he was trying to get that contract renewal. If you want some money, you got to do more than just show up a little bit. But he's the best heel in AEW history, just with the amount of heat he got. And we can prove that with Chris on our podcast.
It's like, as much as I don't like him, I can't really argue with you. Like, I'm trying to think, like, maybe Christian because he's so vicious, but that's just a character thing. That's not a money thing. But yeah, it's hard to disagree.
Yeah, right now, the best heel is Christian. Going against Swerve would be really good. I think that'd be a good story. But anyways, I think Swerve's going to have a really good reign. I hope so. I think he will. But I thought AEW was really good this last week, technically. It was good all 3 shows. A lot of great improvement on storytelling.
Good. Adam, did you have any comments or on how you feel about Swerve so far?
I think he's doing what he needs to do as champion. I like it. I really do. I think the guy's earned it with the amount of basically support he gets from the audience. I heard he's very respectful backstage. I heard he's respected backstage. I mean, this is a guy that, Paul said, has come from Lucha Underground as Kill Shot through the WWE into independence and now over to AEW, and he's their world champion. I think it speaks magnitude when you get a generational talent like Swerve on your roster and you trust in him with your big title. And I think his matches with Kyle and Claudio, I think those are solid. And if he does go the route of the Forbidden Door of wrestling Shingo, I think that would be great. And then after that, you got to get him that big bad heel. And like Connor was saying, I don't think there's the biggest heel in AEW right now than Christian Cage. And we haven't seen Christian since he lost the TNT title to Adam Copeland. And so, I mean, this would be a perfect time to kind of maybe have a promo of Swerve talking about, I'm champ. Like, a lot of people didn't believe in me. And maybe even bring up like his dad.
I was going to say, does Swerve have a father?
I was going to say, bring up a father figure and then just cue Christian's music. He goes, Swerve. Like perfect heel heat right there.
No, he's Swerve. You show a picture of like if Swerve has a child.
Yes.
Christian's eyes just light up.
He's like, oh, you're a terrible father. I can.
He actually mentioned his daughter on Collision, so.
I mean, that could be a setup. He goes, oh, I heard you have a daughter and all that. So, I mean, you got to set up the perfect heel for Swerve. I think that's your biggest thing. You could go back to Swerve Page again, but that you got to save. I mean, if you're going to do that, I don't know. That's a big risk.
If we're talking about biggest heels, I believe Jack Perry is in the company.
Jack Perry could be a good one. I mean, the EVPs can kind of use their power, like, Jack Perry's doing big things. Maybe he deserves a title. Maybe
that's such a heel thing to do, to say, hey, this person, pick a baby face that you could say deserves it, make him win a number 1 contenders match so it gets him a bit more like baby face love, and then just have them go, no, we're putting Jack Perry in. No, he didn't have to do anything to deserve it. He just gets in. You're like,
or if they're going to determine the next match for Double or Nothing, have them do it in like a fatal 4-way and just have Jack Perry in it, but not show up till the end of the match when everyone's exhausted, and then he gets the win just by not doing anything.
His style that he's been practicing in Japan is the very, how do I say, like Southern brawling, slower, boring, lots of like cheating stuff. So it's like, have him in the match, but he can only have to do 3 or 4 things. Just have him do nasty things, and then he can piss around in the back and be a heel. And it's like, he can do literally the least amount of work, get the win, and the crowd will notice that and hate him for it.
I agree. I'm with Connor, though, to finish up what I was saying is that I think this past week for AEW is a really good start of what they need to start doing as a product. But go ahead, Connor.
I was going to say that AEW needs heat, right? Well, they got a lot of heat off that ending of Dynamite. I think Christian Cage for the world title and to elevate Swerve, Christian Cage can elevate Swerve more than Jack Perry can. Christian Cage can give, for example, Swerved and Hangman had a pretty personal story. Christian and Edge had a personal story. Christian can make anyone look like $1 million. He's a very great storyteller, and he's still good in the ring. I mean, he's not like he used 20 years
and he's
ago.
got a few years left in him, so I would definitely trust him with a main event.
Yeah, he's definitely his age and how much he's put his body through in the line. He's willing to do anything at this point.
And the man can pull off a turtleneck while wrestling. That's the best part.
That's amazing.
I think Swerve. I mean, Christian can give. It would probably one of the best stories this entire year if they did it. Because Christian's a good storyteller. Swerved. He's red hot. Once a red hot, but he's pretty on fire right now. And giving him a heel like Swerved, I mean, giving him a heel like Christian, and having a very good rivalry. I can't talk with the flip tonight. That'll be a great story. People will probably never forget, like, Hangman Swerved. Probably will be one of the best stories this year. Could get a lot of fans interested, and it's gonna obviously I would have Swerved to win, and it would elevate Swerved to a whole nother level.
Well, that's great. Well, guys, I think we're heading over about 76 minutes or more. So I think we're going to wrap it up for this week. I think this show has been great insights. Love the conversation. We kind of took a little bit of a different angle this week and just kind of dived into some of these just topics in general, which obviously we all have had opinions on. So, for this week, Paul, it was a pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
It was an honor joining you.
Yeah, no, anytime. Really appreciate your contributions. It was great. Adam, of course, partner in crime, always a pleasure. And Connor, nice to have you join for the whole show this time. So, which is good. It worked out.
Yeah.
Guys, it was awesome. And again, we'll be able to even dive into this even more after this week's shows, and we see what happens with some of these storylines as they develop and if they go to the way we think they're going to go. So, but again, thanks for joining in. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. And Adam, did you want to do a quick plug?
Oh, yeah. Make sure you guys join us. Well, first of all, join us tomorrow for our live reaction in Dynamite, fun-filled Dynamite. We'll find out who the number one contender is for Swerve at Double or Nothing. But yes, Thursday, you guys can join me on Talking Elite here on the podcast every Thursday at 7 o'clock. I've got 2 topics picked out. You're going to have to find out on Thursday which one I chose.
All right. Sounds good. Always a good show. So good luck with the shows. I'm sure they're going to be great. Karan, thanks. Loved it. Thanks again. I really appreciate the tuning in the comments, everybody. Please like and subscribe and tell your family and friends. And we'll do it all again next week on YouTube. Thanks again, guys, and have a good night. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.